Hey, good evening, everybody. It is Robert Phoenix, your guide, scribe, vizier for the next hour or so. Somebody keeps dinging in on me. Dingity, dingity, dingity. Here we go. What's happening? Lots of people chiming in on the Kobe stuff. We're going to talk about Kobe tonight. And we're going to talk about a lot more. Let me throw the link in over on Facebook. It's been super active today over on the 11th house side of things. It's, kind of an area where we talk about astrology. And let's see what do we got here. I just keep getting fed all this information. Let me see what we got here. Hold on a second. Lots of stuff coming in now. Boy, oh boy. Then we got Rosie, queen of the show tonight. Let me go over to the Facebook page. Type that in. Yes, Rosie. Everybody loves you as much as they love Jasper. It's true. It's a terrible picture of me, but I'll go with it. It's like my mouth breather. I'll change it later. Okay, so let's see. What do we got? Who do we got? Let's put this on. Let's go live. Let's mute this sucker. All systems are go. Here we go. All right. Kind of in the flow now. I'm going to get in the flow here. Say hi to Rosie. Rosie's the cat of the moment. Isn't she a pretty girl? Look how pretty Rosie is. She's so pretty. It's a little diva. Now, this cat, I got to tell you this now. Do not be fooled by the gentle and sweet nature of this cat. This cat is a fucking killer. I am telling you right now. If there's a bird, guess who gets the bird? Look at that, Rosie. And more often than not, she will have Jasper on his back, man. So sometimes savage things come in small packages, right, Rosie? Right. She'll be hanging out here tonight. You'll see her very prominent tail from time to time. Kind of an intense day, huh? Think we have a few things to talk about tonight? Yeah, no doubt. Absolutely no doubt. So Michael Cisternino has been sending me some stuff tonight. And I'm going to try to get some of that, some last minute kind of calculations on the death of Kobe Bryant. And so we're going to talk about Kobe. We're going to talk about LeBron. I'm going to bring some charts up. I'm going to look at Kobe's natal chart. I'm going to look at his progress chart. I'm going to look at his relocated chart. He was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He spent a lot of time when he was young, growing up in Italy, where his father played basketball. Kobe spoke fluent Italian, had a share in an Italian soccer club. And I'm also going to look at some of the dark side of Kobe Bryant, because there is definitely an occult and a ritualistic, shall I say, even Luciferic side to Kobe. Now, it's not always easy to sort of take these things apart and look at them in, how do I say this? I don't want to say conspiratorial, but kind of an esoteric and occulted view. But in order to understand in some ways what's going on and maybe what happened with his death, it really helps, I think, to go down those rabbit holes to try to get a better sense as to who Kobe Bryant was, what he was up to, what he was involved with, and his relationship with LeBron James. Got some really interesting stuff around LeBron James and gematria, simple gematria, and was playing with that a bit today. There's a lot of stuff here that is all sort of getting kind of mixed up and swirled together and synthesized and fused. I'm also going to look at China's chart, and I'm going to look at it in terms of how it relates to the coronavirus. Now, corona is actually a really kind of important and key word as it relates to Kobe, LeBron, and even a location in Southern California called Corona, California. Now LeBron, the helicopter, I'm sorry, Kobe, the helicopter he was in crashed in Calabasas. It's about 100 miles away from Corona, but Corona, again, kind of in that Los Angeles vicinity, and LA being really the place of high strange. And we talked about this last night over on Facebook. We talked about things like the Chateau Marmont and what else? We have Laurel Canyon, the Black Dahlia, the Manson murders. I mean, we could just kind of unspool this thing and probably do a good 2-hour show just on the high strange of LA, Babylon Rising. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well, and that's where we're headed. It's a new moon. I'm sure the celebrations in China were muted at best because of what's going on. And I'm going to try to, untangle this coronavirus thing. I wasn't accused, but it was really interesting. I had two separate people who were kind of, how do I say this? Reacting, commenting on my show I did on Friday. And the show I did on Friday, I kind of got into the coronavirus stuff and looking at some of the weird angles, conspiratory angles. I didn't really get into Bill Gates all that much. I probably could have, probably should have. Apparently he's got his hands, he's elbows deep in, of course, we know that he's elbows deep in the vaccine world and the virus world. He unleashed a bunch of like killer mosquitoes down in South America. The country of India wants to sue his ass. Like if he ever sets, he'll never set foot in India, by the way, unless he's like completely undercover. Bill Gates will never set foot in India because they did a vaccine trial in there that went just horribly wrong and a lot of kids died. So this is what we're dealing with Mr. Gates of hell. So I got into Corona on Friday, and it was really interesting because there was this one person who said that they were surprised that I panicked around it. And another person who sent me an email said, you may want to take this thing a bit more seriously, which is kind of interesting because I was trying to hit that midpoint between alarm and caution, right? And so I was really doing my best to say, hey, look, this could be a thing. It could be a thing. And if it is a thing, you may want to take care of your body. You may want to make sure that you're in pretty good health. You may want to ensure you got a few things around just in case you have to stay in your house for a while. Okay. I mean, that's who I am anyway. And at the same time, there's also, the story behind the story. There's the reason behind the reason. There's a distraction in front of the other distraction, which is in front of, another distraction, which might actually be in front of something that we might perceive as truth. So a lot of this is going on with the Corona stuff. I talked about the movement or the march towards a vaccine, right? Because there's a patent. They're working on the vaccine now. The coronavirus actually has a patent. I showed that last week. And so they're working on the vaccine. The thing that is connected to all this is this idea that we might all have to get inoculated with the coronavirus, which could be a hell of a lot worse than the coronavirus. A hell of a lot worse. There's that. And there's also something unusual going on with China and the United States and the trade wars. So there's a lot of moving pieces around this. And of course, there's the panic mode. And one of the things that I think that we have to be cautious of and conscious of is that we've had a lot of false alarms with the viral stuff. People say, oh, there was SARS. Oh, there was the Zika. Oh, there was the bird flu. Oh, there was Ebola. On and on and on and on. One of these days, it's not going to be like that. One of these days, it will, and I'm not saying this is Corona, but one of these days, we will deal with a viral pandemic. And it won't be business as usual. It won't be just like, oh, it's another thing to get us panicked and fearful. Look, this is the key to all this is to be aware and to take care of business. That's the best thing you can do. It's about the only thing you can do. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't. I'm not saying that you should. I'm not saying that you should freak out. Don't freak out. You never want to freak out. That's really, really important. You got to stay as calm and cool as possible. At the same time, it would probably behoove you to make sure that you've got some things like you can rally around, or you can supplement yourself with, just in case. I'm just saying now, just in case. And you definitely want to stay away from the vaccine, because that is first and foremost, because we all know that the vaccine could be just absolutely horrific and even worse than the actual virus itself. Now, one of the things that I've been sort of playing with in terms of a narrative is, let's say this thing does happen to be real. And I'm just throwing it out there. Maybe it is real. And if it is real and it's multiplying and it's becoming a novel virus, which means that it's mutating along the way, the effects could be pretty devastating, theoretically. And if they are devastating, then what will happen to the world? What will happen to the economy? Well, the world is tilting at an incredible rate towards a debt that will never, ever be recovered. I mean, let's be clear. You know, the Rothschilds and the Goldsmiths and the whoever else, the families that we don't know about, I mean, they're all sitting on this massive amount of debt. And they're just sitting around saying, well, sorry. You know, when are we going to, you know, how are we going to collect on this thing? Well, they're not going to be able to collect on it. I mean, they probably own a lot more land and a lot more resources than we know, and that in some ways is their physical. That's what I'm looking for. It's the physical assets that are put towards the debt. We're physical assets, and we show up on a ledger sheet as well. Remember that we're physical assets, and we show up on a ledger sheet. So in a lot of ways, we are collateral against the debt. Land is collateral against the debt. But at some point, it's not going to matter. At some point, they're going to say, look, there's no way we're going to recoup on this. So we may as well, you know, start over. There's your financial reset. But if they do start over, it would probably behoove them to have a whole lot less humans. I'm just throwing that out there. And that goes right in line with the Georgia Guidestone. Now, I'm not preaching doom and gloom, but these are scenarios that if we look at this from a cubist perspective, we have to take that into account. Also, we have to take into account that it's another level of fear porn, quite possibly. You know, so as we move through this experience, the best thing to do is to stay level-headed and to stay calm, and to make sure that you can cover your bases as much as possible. It also brings into this question, or this it's not this piece that I think it behooves each and every one of us to wrap our heads around. I gave a talk a couple of weeks ago to a group of people at the Austin Astrological Association, and or the Austin ASA, Austin Astrological Society, AAS. Anyway, I gave a talk there, and I talked about time and this concept of Capricorn, Pluto, Saturn, the South Node, Jupiter, all in Capricorn. And the word that I wrote on the board, blackboard, was time. And that what we're seeing is this dissipation of time and a running out of time. Like at some point, the script just runs out. Like every single idea that you could think of in a movie or a book winds up being used. You know, how many permutations on a recipe can you actually make, right? At some point, we're going to go through kind of all the novel, at least what we know of right now, all the novel kind of ideas and creativity or narratives that we could run out, right? So what happens then? Well, we kind of run out of ideas. We run out of a script. And this is where we're sort of going in a lot of ways, right? We're kind of dissipating and moving towards this decline of time. Now, of course, there'll be a new time, and there'll be something that comes out of this time. But the time that we're living in now, it's all compressing and collapsing simultaneously. You know, this is the end of the long run of the 20th century. And we're beginning to stare down this idea of the post-human and post-human time. So this is a very interesting piece now when we have this kind of backdrop of the plague, you know, kind of running around, whether you believe it or not, whether you think it's fear porn or not, okay, it's kind of, it's there, sort of stage left. I guess if you're in Wuhan, China, it's front and center. It's like it's on stage now. But whether it's this script that's running in the background around that, or even this idea that, you know, Kobe Bryant died really young, really, really young. died at 41. And I think Michael sent me some numerology around that, which I'm going to check out. But he died at 41 years old. And he ran out of time, right? And it gives us a sense when somebody, this is completely apart from sort of the dark and occulted Kobe script, but it gives us this idea that, wow, you know, there's something major that's happened. There's an event that's happened. This is a person who was global, really global, and young. 41 is young. And he had a daughter who died with him. We're going to talk about that as well. So there's this feeling that he died before his time. Theoretically, I don't think he did, but he died before his time. And so again, it brings up this idea around time and how time is shifting in a lot of ways. And in my estimation, this cycle of time that we're in is just completely, it's descending. I wouldn't say it's degrading, although some may say we live in degrading times. I wouldn't have a problem with that. But time itself is beginning to wind down. And that when you add up Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter, and especially that south node, we've never seen this before. We've never seen this before astrologically. Never happened. Pluto, Saturn, south node, Jupiter, it's never occurred. Like this is a once in a lifetime, once in a planetary cycle in a lot of ways. And so when we look at the south node to me is, it represents a form of dissipation, and it represents the past, right? When you look at the nodes, the true node represents the present, and the south node represents the past, and Capricorn represents time. So Pluto represents the deep transformation of time, the deep transformation of culture in the world. Saturn is the ticker. It is the clock of the chart. And when I do readings, I'm always looking at Saturn. Where's Saturn? What's it doing? Where's it been? Where's it going? You know, when you know where Saturn is in your chart, literally and metaphorically, you know where you are. But that's a really important piece to understand about Saturn. It is the timekeeper of the chart. So now that we have Saturn and Pluto there together, it is transforming the nature of time. Jupiter expands this concept, and the south node represents the past, right? So the past is going away. It is moving away, boys and girls. And what we do at this time now is really, really important, really important. And I'm not saying the world is going to end tomorrow or next week or next month or next year. I'm not saying that at all, because time is a tricky concept. It's a tricky reality in this world, especially now that I think it's changing. But that said, it's really, I think, incumbent upon each of us to get to a point where, you know, we are as clear as we can possibly be, where we can really move through our material as quickly as we possibly can. And that's not always easy, because we have to face our fears. We have to face our fears, whatever our fears are, being alone, being poor, being sick, whatever those fears are. This is kind of this time where, you know, we need to go through them. It's not easy, but the payoff is pretty substantial in terms of, you know, this life. And it's like, and what do you take with you? This is really the big and the important question. It's like, when you leave, what are you taking with you? Well, I hope that you take with you some things that you've resolved here, because you're not going to get to resolve them out there. You know, this is not going to happen. This is where it happens. This is where you get to level up. And if you don't level up here, you're missing a tremendous opportunity. And I know it's difficult at times. I know people are going through difficult circumstances, health-wise, money-wise, career-wise. All those are very important, family-wise. But there's nothing that we can't get through, and there's nothing that we can't get through. You know, we can get through things if we have the grace of God and the power of the Logos, which is helping us move through difficult periods, so that we get stronger and so that we can have a higher realization of our consciousness. Right, our consciousness is always there. What we want is a higher realization of our consciousness. And this is a time to do it. People are going through a lot of difficulties. You know, people are going through a lot of stress during this period that we're in. And it's also, when that stress level is high, it also gives you the greatest opportunity to go through it and grow through it. So that's my That's my opening talk for tonight. It's weird, you know, when I stand up, I'm in a different, I feel like I'm in a different rhythm. I feel like it's a different kind of pace. I feel more physical when I stand up. Anyway, let's check in with you guys before we jump into. I'm going to do the chart of the moment tonight. We're going to look at where we are the week ahead. Then I'm going to get into the Kobe stuff. And the Kobe stuff is pretty compelling in a lot of ways, and also quite dark. There's a real palpable darkness because, number one, Kobe was an international figure, and aside from the fact that he was probably a high-level Luciferian, he was beloved by people. Like, people loved Kobe, especially in LA. I mean, that was Kobe's town. We're gonna talk about that a little bit. That it was Kobe's territory, but that's part of the darkness, like the grief. I mean, there are people who are really whacked out around this passing. So again, the kind of, you know, it feeds into this kind of dark time that we're in. So 2020 is starting off with a real hoot and a bang, isn't it? Coronavirus and Kobe Bryant. And it's all upwards from here. All right, let me check in with you guys in the chat, see what's going on in the chat room. What do we got? You take your consciousness with you. Well, you better hope your consciousness is about as good as it's going to get here, right? Because the shit you don't work out here, you're not going to be able to work out there. And if you do, it's going to be a whole lot harder. Your demons will follow you to the next place. And if they're telling you right now, they're even worse there. And so you want to be as clean and clear and resolved as possible. What else do we have here? The increase in child abuse cases and murders this month is appalling. Okay. Let's see what else we have. Alex says hi. Hi, Alex. Greetings from Finland. Hey, what's going on? Hello. Hello. Welcome to the show. Nancy, thrilled to be here. Never found last week's program on YouTube. 2 cities I will never visit again due to the vibes. LA, New York City. I used to love going to New York. That was one of my favorite places in the world. In the world. I didn't know that about Saturn. Looks like mine is on the cusp of my 10th and 11th house and is in Aquarius. It's not fake to those who don't know any different. Look how much fake 9/11 changed everything. Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of like when people say, Kennedy didn't die. Well, first of all, he did die. And again, I'll tell the story again. For all the people who think Kennedy didn't die, one of my clients, her husband was a brain surgeon in triage, emergency in Dallas. He freaking worked on Kennedy's brain. Okay? Worked on him. Tried to save him. So for all you people out there, I think Kennedy did die. You got to re-rack your head around that one. Okay, eyewitness. The guy that was there, the guy that worked on him, said an interesting thing. Apparently, what's her name? Jackie. When she walked into the emergency, when she walked in and she saw him dead, she did this really strange thing. She took off her wedding ring and placed it on him, and then waved her hand in a circle around him, and then walked out. And she wasn't crying or very unemotional, non-emotional, not very non-emotional. Why wouldn't she keep her wedding ring? That was interesting, right? That was really, really interesting. Just a little known factoid that you didn't know about the Kennedy assassination and death. Let's see, what else do we have here in Chatlandia? Let's see, we got, hey, what's going on? Dissipation in Amsterdam. I went on vacation to the mountains and woods and literally cried when I came back through Chicago and Milwaukee. You know, that is such a big statement, because there's such a disparity between the natural state and the world we're living in. It's such a raw juxtaposition. Christy, thanks for bringing that up. I discovered these videos of this cougar named Messi. You guys should check this channel out. It's called I Am Puma. And I spent a lot of time yesterday looking at these videos. and it's a Russian couple who has a small kind of half-size cougar as their house pet. And this cat, this big cat, is just so freaking adorable, and he's so beautiful, and he's so kind, and there's so much love that goes on between the three of them. And they have one of those weird Egyptian hairless cats, who's the fourth member of the band. But there's something about those videos that really speaks to a lot of people, and it has to do with the fact that there's a sense of wholeness there, and a sense of love, and a real sense of family, and a sense that we're not separate from nature. And here's this, potentially really powerful and wild beast, and he's just the biggest pussycat there is, right? And it's really heartwarming to watch those videos. And what's happened is we've been yanked out of that. We've been yanked out of that holistic state, and I think we're craving for that. We're really, really craving for that. And unfortunately, what we're seeming to get now is more stimulation. So it knocks us out of our natural frequencies. And I know that there are some people who believe that 5G is here, and for our best interests, and it's actually a good thing. Well, apparently they just opened 5G in China, in Wuhan. So not only do you have this outbreak in Wuhan, there's also the 5G factor that comes in, and it feels like 5G can even scatter us even more and further from nature as well. So the idea here is to try to spend some time in nature and try to stay grounded while we're going through this major transition, culturally, astrologically, personally, individually. These are big times. We're not living in a mundane era at all. You're going to see things and be a part of things that you'll when we get through to the other side, you're going to say to yourself, holy shit, we just went through that, right? This is going to be a major, major epic and turning point in the story of humanity on this planet. And you're here, you got front row seats. All right, let's see what else we have in the chat room. Let's see. Shasta Fox says, I love I Am Puma. Yeah, isn't that a great show? They've done an amazing job taming and training this very large cat. He is so tame. What's interesting about that? I'm always like surprised by downvotes. A lot of upvotes, but man, there's like sometimes 400, 500. How can you downvote a show like that? How can you down? I guess here's what I think. I think that there's a bunch of people that think, oh man, look at them. Oh, they've taken that cougar out of the natural environment. Oh, that cougar needs to be out and running around out in the wild. I mean, it's probably some group of animal rights activists who have their a thorn up their ass about this family and this cougar. Like, lighten up. Why can't I don't get the thumbs down on that. I mean, theoretically, I get it, but like, come on. This is like really high level quality bonding and good feeling and inspiration. You don't invite those people to your party. Let's see, there was a huge explosion in Houston. That's right. That kind of went unanswered. That went under the radar, Anna. Thank you for bringing that up. There was a major explosion in Houston on Friday. Big, really big. Some people said it might have been a nuclear explosion. I don't agree with that. But that was the force, because people felt it with a force. We don't need any more than 4G for human. I agree, Lady Z, I agree. 5G is for the machines. That's to get them humming. We don't fucking need it, because the machines are gonna have to be hooked up, with these very short bursts, MIMOs, because the 5G broadcast range is very, very short. So these MIMOs will be everywhere. But they rolled out 5G in Wuhan. Coincidence? Maybe. Cougar is very happy. That cougar is having the best life out of any cougar on this planet. Don't you think? If you've watched those shows, I mean, he's living the best cougar life ever. Cougar seems, I agree with that. Zeus was the name of the Australian firefighter plane that crashed. Interesting. What else do we have here? Alex Silva, that Caribbean plate fault line is very active now. Oh, yeah. Earthquake in Puerto Rico. Boy, Puerto Rico's turned into a real pit of hell, hasn't it? Wow. I feel for those people down there. They're having a very hard time. Very hard. It's almost like they're trying to evacuate the island. What's there in Puerto Rico? Right? What is there besides Tartarian stuff? There's probably something there with the island that they want to get a hold of. All right, let's get into the chart of the week, and we'll be able to look at where things are. I pulled this just before the show started. By the way, big shout out, happy birthday to one Natasha Lloyd, who I think is in the chat room tonight. Give it up for Natasha. It was one of the best charts I've ever seen. I'm envious of her chart. Hers and Jimmy Garoppolo's chart. Jimmy Garoppolo has an amazing fucking chart. He's got an amazing life. He's Jimmy G. Okay, here we go. Chart of the moment. I pulled this up just before we went on the air. So we're clearly Leo ascending for our time together tonight. Perhaps we move into the Virgo hour. We are in Aquarius season. There's the sun. We're just coming off the new moon. We had the new moon, which is always the beginning of the Chinese New Year. And we are in the year of the rat. There we go. Year of the rat. That's where it's at. And it's the metal rat. And I happen to be a metal rat. And supposedly it's not the best year for me because it's in my own locality. Well, I guess that's the way it is. Okay, so what do we got? Mars in Sagittarius right there. And Mars getting into square right now with Neptune. So this is kind of a critical time and a critical phase with a Mars-Neptune square because it's going to show up. It's going to show up in your chart, obviously, wherever you have Sagittarius and wherever you have Pisces in your chart. That area of your chart is going to get squared right now. So you have to understand the nature, or be helpful to understand the nature of the Mars-Neptune square. Generally speaking, when I see people that have Mars-Neptune squares in their charts, there can be a problem with addiction. My experience with the Neptune squares is that the Mars square and the Sun square tend to be very addictive. The Jupiter square can be addictive, but it can be addictive to like different kinds of states, right? Like it could be addicted to megalomania or thinking that one is God, right? I mean, there can be a God addiction with a Jupiter-Neptune square. But Mars represents our ability to make things happen. It represents our ability to have an expression of will and action and the male principle in the world. And Neptune represents here in square with Mars a diminishing of that capacity. And this is what leads to the addiction, because people feel like they can't cope or they can't keep going, or life is nothing but a series of defeats, because Mars is in the business of conquest and victory and achievement and actualization and manifestation. And if you have a Neptune squared with Mars in your chart, one of the downsides of that is never being able to either get ahead or feeling like everything you do is pointless or worthless or useless. And in many cases, there can be humiliating acts. And sometimes it can be sexual with Mars, because Mars does represent sex. So when you get a Mars-Neptune square early on in life, the pattern can be set for what turns out to be addictive behavior later on. It's a very tricky square to have. It is not something that is it's not a game ender. It's not terminal, but I think it's one of the harder aspects in astrology to overcome, because there has to be some form of higher agency that is invoked with a Neptune Mars square. I mean, clearly this would be not mind will, right, which is Mars, but thine will, which is Neptune, be done. And for a lot of people to wrap their arms around that, that's very difficult. Oh, I don't believe in that shit. I don't believe there's a God. That's just a fairy tale, those Abrahamic fairy tales. And there's some truth in them being fairy tales in some ways, right? But we're not dealing with that. We're dealing with this creative force, logos, which represents our internal hopes, wishes, desires, dreams, manifestations, and our external order. It's through everything. And what's happening currently is that we're living in a world where everything's been inverted. And there's a war on logos. There's a war on creative order in our lives. This is what's going on. This is why we're dealing with all this symbolism, all this inversion, all the desecration, because this is this is what's happening, right? And so when we get into this Mars-Neptune square, what really needs to happen to overcome one's inability to feel like, well, I can't do anything, or I'm useless, or I'd rather just medicate because it makes me feel better when I'm not able to do what I need to do in this world. You've got to level up. You got to level up, not my will, but thine will be done, right? And if you can get to that point and you can work with your Mars-Neptune square, I think it's really one of the biggest spiritual tests that one can face in a chart. And if you can overcome it and deal with it and get on top of it, then you have incredible compassion. And you're dealing with not your will, but you're dealing with a higher will. In that case, you can accomplish great things, really great things. But again, there can be a lot of trauma and there can be a lot of encoding with that Mars-Neptune square. So what does it mean for us now? It means that culturally, in a mundane sense or a collective sense, this is a time where if we focus on the outer world, that we can feel quite defeated. We can feel very defeated. If we look at the events around us, we could say, holy shit, I want out of here. Kobe Bryant just died. We've got this coronavirus coming on. We might go to war with Iran. We've got this impeachment thing with Trump, and Michael Bloomberg is kind of lurking, in the shadows. I mean, there's a lot we could focus on right now that probably wouldn't be all that encouraging, but you can't let it get you down. You can't. This is the message for our time right now with that Mars-Neptune square. You got to level up. Not mine will, but thine will be done. How do I get through this time? How do I get through this period? It's funny. I was having a really good conversation with somebody on Facebook last night. He came through the 11th house, and he had a really interesting chart, and he was talking to me. He was saying, I keep making deals with God, and the deal with God I have is, please God, I'll do what you want if you can just get me out of here. I'm like, that's kind of a double negative in some ways. And I said to him, look, I think if you rephrase your language a little bit, you might get a bit of a different outcome, right? On that deal that you're making. And we talked about it, and he says, you're right. I've been using the wrong language. I've been using the wrong verbiage. So that was a really instructive conversation, especially for me to have, because whenever I connect with people and talk with people, it's like I'm also learning about myself, and I'm also learning about my own process, because this is how the game works. We're all, it's sort of like that quote by Gurdjieff, or the question by Gurdjieff. Gurdjieff, the so-called spiritual master of the early 20th century, he would sit down with people, and he would ask them, do you know how many people there are in the world? And they would say, oh, no, what, at that time, 3 billion or whatever. And he'd say, no, there's only 8 people in the world. Everybody else is just a reflection. And he was kind of referring to the Enneagram in some ways, that everybody's just a reflection and kind of a type. And I think that that's probably true. So when you go through your life and you go through your process and you're living on a daily basis, in many cases, you're in a hall of mirrors. And that's why you want to be cool to people that you meet, because you might meet yourself along the way, and you might have to show a little compassion, temperance, and patience with the parts of yourself that don't always measure up. So, by the way, is there really 7 billion people in the world? Like this is the thing that like I've been kind of playing with. How do we know there's 7 billion people in the world? I mean, how do we really know there's 7 billion people in the world? Do we really know there's 7 billion people in the world? Like, how do they keep track of that? Maybe there's 5 billion people. Maybe there's 4 billion people. Maybe there's, I don't know, 900, I don't know. But to just roll that estimation off, of course, we're always going to trust the UN and the WHO for those numbers, right? No. I just think that the 7 billion number, closer to 8 billion now, apparently, is something that maybe we should reconsider and think about and look at. All right. So we got the Mars-Neptune square. Now, I'm trying to think, is this also related to contagion? I'm trying to wrap my head around that. Is this related to contagion and the spread of a disease or a virus? Now, when we look at Mars, right, we look at Mars and it's in Sagittarius, which is global. This is a global Mars. And Neptune, to me, does represent contagion, viruses, virulence, right? That's, to me, that shit's Neptunian. Well, why? Well, number one, it's created in a freaking lab in most cases. And where do we find the labs? The 12th house. The lab is an appendage, not an appendage, but it's a cousin of a hospital. It's a cousin. You don't go to a lab to get well, but it's a place where people just don't go. It's not your everyday kind of location now, is it? They don't take your kids on elementary school trips to labs, do they? They may take them to a few other places, the state capital, but the labs aren't happening. So that said, the 12th house is connected to Neptune. Neptune is classically, natally, the ruler of the 12th house, right? So if we can establish that, now we have Neptune in Pisces, again with Pisces, the ruler of the 12th house. And now we have Mars squaring Pisces. So is this aspect indicative of what's happening with the coronavirus? Possibly. I mean, it does line up astrologically in some ways. Now, there's some very interesting thoughts that this is a bioweapon that was actually inserted into China. So that's another interesting wrinkle around this, that most viruses are bioweapons, going all the way back to the Spanish flu, the Black Plague, and all that stuff, right? They're all bioweapons. Anthrax, when it had the anthrax blankets, they're all bioweapons. Very, very few viruses. Lyme is a bioweapon. They're all fucking bioweapons, if you really want to boil it down. But this really has the look and the feel, and it's right there, 1616 with the square. Mars is also squaring Venus right now. And we've got this Venus-Neptune conjunction, which can be very nice and very compassionate, very deep and very loving. But this Mars square is agitating that. It's agitating. So today's, I think, overall mood, and as we move through the week here, the first few days, as Mars begins to separate, is a mood of agitation. It's not a peaceful vibe. We do have Jupiter here at 12 Capricorn in a wide trine with Uranus. It's beginning to separate. We'll be there for a little bit, but this is where things can happen quickly. You can make connections quickly. When I say make connections, I'm talking about connections mentally, sort of outside the box thinking, pretty good improvisational energy, but it's starting to separate and move away. And fairly soon, we're gonna have that Jupiter-Pluto conjunction. I think it's gonna happen, the end of February? That's a big one. That's a really, really big conjunction, the story of time. We also have Pluto now beginning to, let's see, is that in a square with the moon? Sure is. So we're talking about 9 degrees. Now Uranus will get up to 6 degrees this year, so it'll begin to separate more from this square. But we do have a Pluto-Uranus square going on, and again, from kind of a global or collective perspective, Pluto is the harbinger of death, transformation. And squaring Pluto, it's like people dying quickly, very quickly. Like this is a Kobe event. I know other people who have people just pass really quickly over the last month. And people tend to pass during the eclipse cycles, by the way. They tend to move on during the eclipse cycles. So this is a very powerful time, especially with the Pluto-Uranus square. It is not business as usual, but luckily Uranus is going to move out of square with that as it begins to separate. But the impact of the events or the impact of the passings are going to be taking place, and people dealing. Like, what's really interesting too, let me talk a little bit about sports, and of course I'm getting to Kobe, is that if you watch or follow professional football, that there is this passing of the guard now. You know, people like Phillip Rivers and Drew Brees and Tom Brady and Eli Manning, they're all, you know, moving out. Or Rivers may not be, but they're moving out, they're moving on, they're trying to figure out what their next step is. Joe Flacco, you could probably put him. They're all quarterbacks, and they all represent a certain time that we associate with football. They represent a time where there was this continuity, you know, from one quarterback to another, from one team to another, from one dynasty to another. And those guys are starting to leave the game now. So they also are representatives of a certain marker of time. And there's a whole new wave of quarterbacks that are coming in that represent, in some ways, with the American sport, a new time. But if you look at those quarterbacks, Drew Brees is a Capricorn. Eli Manning is a Capricorn. Joe Flacco is a Capricorn. And Tom Brady has Sun conjunct Saturn in his chart, Capricorn. So not Capricorn, but it's a Saturnian influence. So those are 4 quarterbacks all associated with the sign of Capricorn. And as I've been talking about, they're kind of moving away from the game. And if not this year, certainly next year. Clearly with Brees, he's on the fence. He's not sure if he's going to play or not. Tom Brady's not sure if he's going to show up or not, or what team he's going to play for. So there's all this. Eli Manning just retired. Joe Flacco, he'll probably retire. Maybe he'll catch on with another team, but certainly his time with the Denver Broncos is over. And Phillip Rivers is a Sagittarius. He'll probably stick around and try to squeeze out another season with Bruce Arians. So you'd have 3 quarterbacks that are Capricorns and 1 quarterback with a Sun-Saturn conjunction. Kobe Bryant, Sun-Saturn conjunction. Again, time, right? It's another anchor in this concept around time. What else do we have? Well, we have Jupiter in a nice sextile with Neptune. That's pretty good. That's not a bad sextile. That's about compassion. That's about empathy. That's about charity. It's good. It's an active aspect. Sextiles tend to be active, meaning you have to activate them. So wherever Jupiter is in your chart, wherever Neptune is in your chart, that's where the energies are coming together. And you can practice a sense of compassion and empathy in those places, in those spaces. For instance, I have Jupiter in my 4th house transiting. I have Neptune in second house and Neptune in my 4th house. So it would be good for me to look at connections between my resources and my material values with what's going on in my 4th house, which is connected to my spiritual values or my emotional values related to my home, my family. So this is a really good time for me to kind of hook those things up, right? To either find a place that's going to be feeling more like home in some ways, or in other areas of my life being more kind of, again, compassionate, more empathic, and kinder with this part of my chart. So it's real easy to do. All you got to do is look at where Capricorn is in your chart and look where Pisces is. That's where Neptune and Jupiter are showing up. And now's the time where you can actually get into that flow. And it's a good flow to get into. It's a really good flow. It's a charitable flow too. So you may want to think about practicing charity. We also have this Mars sextile to Mercury, and that's going to be on for the next few days. And that's a really good sextile. I love that sextile because that's where things, you can think fast, think on your feet quickly. You can move, you can make, you can sort of plan very quickly. Things come together quickly. There's a lot of economy here. When you think about something and you put your mind to it, you put your will into action, this Mars-Mercury sextile is terrific. And with Mercury in Aquarius, we're talking about new ideas, new ways of seeing things, right? So new ways of seeing things and new ways of doing things with that Mars sextile to Mercury. It's in the 2nd decan. So if we start here with the 1st decan, the 2nd decan is going to be Gemini. So that's about being inventive. It's about trying new things. It's about looking at things from different perspectives. So you get a chance to do that this week. Let's see, what else do we have? We talked about the improvisation of Jupiter and Uranus. We talked about the sextile here. Oh, okay, sextile with the moon. The moon just went into Pisces at 0 degrees. That's very interesting. That has an impact on Kobe's chart. Kobe is a 0 degree Virgo. So this moon opposition now is going to be very emotional. There's going to be a lot of emotion around Kobe Bryant. Again, you have to figure out whether or not he's worth it. I know a lot of people that really follow the Lakers. By the way, the Lakers are a pit, man. They are just a pit. I'll talk a little bit about the Lakers. But we have this moon sextile to Uranus, and that allows you, again, sextiles are about adapting. To me, sextiles are quite mutable in a lot of ways. So here's my little theory on the signs, right? So oppositions to me tend to be fixed. They're fixed. Like if you have an opposition in your chart, that's kind of a fixed thing. You know, one thing is here and one thing is here, and it's kind of a fixed entity. You're trying to work on the opposition and fix in some ways the duality. To me, the squares tend to be cardinal. Squares are cardinal for me because they're there to get you to do something, right? Like I always thought, my take on squares is that they're very Saturnian because you have to work with a square. And of course, Saturn, the ruler Capricorn being a cardinal sign. So squares to me are cardinal. And you work with that cardinal energy. You work with the square so you can fire up against it. What happens when you have squares, you have friction in the chart. One planet is going like this to another planet, right? And that's cardinal energy. That's sparking energy. Sextiles to me tend to be mutable. They tend to be mutable energy. Like you're checking it out. You're getting into it. You're trying that hat on for size. Well, what's it feel like? Oh, it feels like this. Let me try it on. Let me figure it out. Let me play with this. And trines are interesting because I think a trine is maybe a compendium of all the other triplicities. That's what we call them, by the way. Mutable, fixed, and cardinal. Those are the triplicities. So to me, the trine is everything rolled into one. It's fixed, it's mutable, and cardinal. You get to have the experience, you get to have the luxury of working that channel, and it's all integrated. So there you go. All right, chart of the moment. There's your walking papers for the week ahead. Let's see what you guys have to say in the chat room there. Let's see what we got. Let me open this back up. Let's see. What do we got? What do we got? Cato says, it's sad. I was just thinking a couple days ago, there hadn't been a major, tragic, unexpected celeb death. Yeah, that was kind of on my radar too. It was like, okay, who's next to go? He's using Placidus. Yes, I am. Placidus. Thank you for clarifying that, Alex. I always use, sorry, let me clarify. I always use Placidus. That's my thing. That's what I was introduced to. I'm not averse to change. A lot of people like equal sign, whole sign, equal house systems. Whatever floats your boat. I like Placidus. I like the fact that it doesn't always line up, that you have to kind of work for things. That's just me. Okay, what else do we have here? Place it on his finger or something close to that. I don't know. Are you talking about Kennedy? Well, I'm just telling you, man. I'm just telling you what my client's husband told her about Jackie, and I have no reason to doubt this person. Let's see. Thank you, Robert. Very helpful info. Good. I'm glad. We try to be educational here, right? And the virus is airborne. Yep, it certainly is, whatever it is. Stevie Ray Vaughan went down in a helicopter in 83. I think Stevie Ray Vaughan went down in a plane. I actually looked up famous helicopter deaths, and Stevie Ray Vaughan was not on there. I think, let's see, Vic Morrow was on there. He was a famous helicopter death. And who else? There was a rock and roll guy that was it? Nah, what it wasn't Leonard Skinner and Van Zandt. There was somebody else who went down in a helicopter. Jane Dornacker, who was in a band called Lila and the Snakes back in San Francisco. Bill Graham went down in a helicopter. Bill Graham was coming back from, he's a Capricorn. He was coming back from a concert, and he went down. Bill Graham was a complicated character. Wow. Was he complex? Seems aircraft only go down if there's a celeb on board. Let's see. We were talking about the Kobe symbolism on RX. Only Discord Tracy used to be on. Oh, okay. Interesting. Hi, Krista. Oh, by the way, Steve and Ani, you should be moderators. If not, yeah, no, you're a moderator, Steve. So Ani and Steve are the sheriffs in Chatlandia. What do I think of being the year of the metal rat in Chinese astrology and rat being the carrier of disease? Oh, that's a really interesting connection. Good one, Krista. Well, yeah, it's a very interesting symbolism, isn't it? I think there are other animals that have some disease carrying qualities as well. Those open air markets in Japan or China, they're freaky. You know, they're really freaky. You can get like weird shit there, like weird stuff. I mean, ooh. Ay. You know, that apparently they're having a really tough time with pigs also in China. Like they have a huge pig mortality rate in China because of, you know, overbreeding and all kinds of stuff. And they've been having to buy a lot of pigs and bring a lot of pigs over from the United States. So there are a few other, as long as it's not cats. I don't want a Simpsons cat apocalypse. I'm invested in those guys over there. But yeah, you bring up a good point, Krista, with rats. I actually had a rat when I was a kid. Really great pet. Really wonderful pet. Cleo. She was an albino rat. Love Cleo. I'll never forget when one time I took Cleo with me in my Oakland Raiders jacket. And we went to McDonald's. I went to McDonald's with my mother. And I wanted to freak my mother out, which apparently I did a pretty good job of. So we're inside McDonald's and I opened up my jacket and I said, "Hey, look, Cleo's here." And she freaked out, man. She totally freaked out. Robert, put that back. Put that back. Get out of here. I loved it. Anyway, rats are cool, man. I dig rats. Then again, I am one. Oh, yeah. Okay, what do we have here? Did you see the cartoon on Kobe's death? Absolutely. Yep. We're going to get into that. The fleas on the rats carry the disease. Many people have rats as pets. Yeah, like I had a great, Cleo was great. She was totally great. All right, let's make a transition here. Let's get into some of the Kobe stuff. And okay, give me 1 second here. I got a bunch of Kobe charts. All right, so I'm going to have Kobe's natal chart here. Now, he's got a C-rated chart, which means that it's not considered like the highest rated chart. Like if you go to astro.com, you'll see ratings with charts. It'll either be AA, A, B, C, D, or X. And X means good luck. This is a C chart. So somebody seems, I think it was Lois Roden, who was the maven of these charts. So she seems to have kind of an idea as to when Kobe was born. She's placing that at 5 p.m. I would assume that that may not be completely correct. If it's a straight up 5 p.m., but we could probably guess that he was somewhere in the Cap rising vicinity, because he certainly had the mentality of somebody with Capricorn rising. And not only that, but he also had a Sun-Saturn conjunction. So I definitely would say Saturn is the ruler of his chart, for sure. So he was almost like a double Capricorn, and driven in a way that most people would not be driven. And what's interesting about his chart, his natal chart, is that he has Sun and Saturn in the 8th house. Now that changes for him when he relocates to Los Angeles, which I'll show you, and he becomes a 9th house character. So Kobe has in the 8th house what I would call an occulted sun, meaning that in the 8th house or even in the 12th house, it is hidden. The 4th house to some extent, but really it's the 8th and the 12th house. So occulted, meaning it's, hidden, tucked away, occluded. You can't see it. So when people have Sun in the 8th, Venus in the 8th, Moon in the 8th, they have a very different, sometimes even Saturn, although Saturn can be imposed with external structures or external figures. They have a very different script going on behind the scenes that the world does not see. This is the nature. It's the nature of the 8th house. So Kobe had something like the 8th house is dark. It's a dark house. It is definitely a dark house. It doesn't mean you're a dark person, but it's a dark house, and you work with material in a darker, more scorpionic kind of way. It's just the nature of the 8th house. I've got Mars in the 8th house. I understand this. And my vertex is in the 8th house. He also has Mercury in the 8th house. So to me, Mercury in the 8th house would represent a seeker after occulted knowledge. And everybody I've ever known that has Mercury in the 8th house are either into solving puzzles, trying to understand what's going on behind the scenes, trying to understand the nature of power, and trying to understand or wrap their heads around occult or esoteric ideas. So I would say that this sums Kobe up in kind of a big way. There was a hidden side to Kobe, and he's always been, it's interesting because when they talk about the greatest of all time, and I watch these debates all the time on these sports channels. So who's the greatest of all time? LeBron or Michael? LeBron or Michael? LeBron or Michael? Kobe gets left out of that conversation. It's quite interesting. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that his Sun is in the 8th house. He also happens to be a Virgo. His Sun is at 0 Virgo. So when he was born, Regulus was like at 29 degrees. So he was born with his Sun on Regulus. And if you know anything about fixed star astrology, that's one of the royal stars. So as an astrologer, you look at that and say, this person is destined to do something, right? They are destined to make an impact on the world. Just like, let's see, what is it? Regulus is on Trump's ascendant. Do the math there. So Kobe was born under the sign of the king. He's born under the sign of the king. Now, who else do we know as the king? LeBron James. I'm going to get into that a little bit. So the Saturn-Sun conjunction is relentless. But to me, also, there's a piece of instruction around Saturn and the conjunction with the Sun here. Because Saturn's the father, but it also represents teachers in some ways and guides. So I would not be surprised if Kobe had a teacher, right? And I would say he probably had an occult teacher as well. Now, Saturn is connected to Capricorn and the goat. And I'm going to play you a really interesting video. I want you to watch this video, and I want you to be attuned to the Saturnian symbolism. And this gives you kind of an idea of who and what Kobe was probably behind the scenes. Let me cue this thing up. Some of you have seen the video, some of you haven't, but you will be certainly a bit blown away, especially with the cast of characters. I remember when I first saw this video, I was like, Kobe's taking lessons. Kobe's an adept. I'll show you. So Kobe did this thing called the Kobe system. And I'm going to turn this down, mute it. Keep an eye on who the players are and how they show up here and some of the symbolism. I'm going to press play. I'm going to stop it along the way so you guys can see it. Okay. Let's do this. Here we go. The Kobe system. So this is it. All right, stop right here. Hold on. Up. What do we have here? The capstone. The capstone. And the capstone and the pyramid is, guess what? It is related to Capricorn. Why? Capricorn represents mountains. It represents very tall buildings. And yes, it represents pyramids. Why? Because you want to get to the top. That is the goal. The goat wants to get to the top of the mountain. So here we have right out of the gate, Capricorn imagery. All right, here we go. I got to be faster. Boom. Okay. So now we have the Capricorn imagery here with the X symbol. And of course, X is symbolic of Satan. That's why you don't say Xmas, right? So here we have the X and the pyramid. Very interesting symbol. And over here, it's kind of hard to see, but it looks like we have a goat over here, right? A goat here. And then, of course, the Nike swoosh, which is the ring of Saturn. So we have Saturn, Saturn, Saturn all the way through here. Kobe is an agent of Saturn, and we saw that in his chart, the Saturn-Sun conjunction. Here we go. Oh, ho. You shall be known by the company ye keep. Richard Branson. Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins. I used to do a Tony Robbins impression. Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins. Yeah, Tony got a little stain on him. Tony got a little stain on him. Richard Branson, a whole lot of stain. And they're there. They're there. They are taking lessons from Kobe. Oh, they're not the only one that's there. Oh, there's that guy. You know what happened to that guy? You know what happened to that dude? What's his name? Aziz Ansari. He got hashtag Me Too'd. He's like, this guy doesn't work anymore. Sacrificial. Here we go. There's Kobe instructing everybody success. The Kobe system. Look at that. Oh, yeah. Oh, they're approving. You're darn right they're approving. They like it. Wonder if they're his teachers. Here we go. Talking about the shoe. Oh, of course. I'm taking notes. Strong. Oh, look who's there. Mr. Yeezus himself. I mean, this thing just is like, it's amazing. You got Tony Robbins, you got Richard Branson, and now you got Kanye, who's in his Yeezus phase there, asking questions. He's the one that asks questions. He's the Gemini. He's got to ask the fucking question. Oh, yeah. Oh, now he's, oh, go back. Go back. You know who that is? That's Jerry Rice. Jerry Rice. Jerry Rice redefined the definition of goat. Before, a goat was somebody who did something bad. Like you had to wear goat horns. Like if you fucked up, oh, you were the goat. Now the goat has been changed to greatest of all time. And Jerry Rice has more receptions and yards than anybody else in the history of the NFL. Nobody's going to catch him. Larry Fitzgerald might try to catch him. Good luck. He's that far ahead of everybody. Jerry Rice is the GOAT. So now here we have this celebration, this Saturnian rite, which is being essentially sponsored by Nike, and they got to have the GOAT. The GOAT's got to be there. There's Kobe. Oh, there's the sacrificial lamb. He winds up being the GOAT. It's like, what is he doing there? Attack fast, attack strong, learn the system, Nike basketball. So it basically plays over again. All right, this is the second go around of that commercial. And this gives us some insight in some ways into the eighth house life of Kobe Bryant, because I think it's pretty clear that he had an eighth house life going on, and that there was a very different and very occulted side of Kobe. So let me bring his chart back up here a little bit. He also had something called the Muse Cage, which was his sort of playpen for ideas. That's a whole other topic of conversation. What I wanted to bring into the discussion or into the fold are some of the planets in transit. So these are his progressed planets. Now this is interesting because he has Pluto at 14 Libra, and his progressed sun, let me zoom in on that just a little bit. His progressed sun is at 10 Libra. So while it's not exact, right? It's not exact. His progressed sun is very close to Pluto. Now, what is conjunct here is Mercury. And we were talking about this today over on the 11th house side of things. I hope Justin is in the chat tonight. Justin Voss. He was asking about this. He says, well, you know, what are helicopter crashes associated with? Like, you know, is it air? Is it water? Is it for what sign? So obviously, when we talk about planes or helicopters, hang gliders, air. It's air. Now, Kobe was involved in what? Local air, because that's where the crash happened, not far from where he actually lived. They were on their way to a basketball game. So here we have progressed Mercury on his Pluto. Now, certainly that can represent kind of revelatory ideas in some ways, right? But it could also represent that there could be danger around travel with Mercury here. Now, the sun is getting ready to conjunct Mars. It's about 2 degrees off of Mars. And Mars-Sun conjunctions in the progressed chart can be interesting and tricky at the same time. Here it's tricky because it's also feeding into an inconjunct right there with Chiron and with Uranus, and then transiting, sorry, the moon. If we put transiting Uranus here, transiting Uranus would be very close, well, within 7 degrees of his natal Chiron, and not quite involved in the Uranus-Uranus opposition. But the inconjunct is, to me, is interesting because here we have like the anchor of his chart. It's interesting too. He's got Chiron at 9 degrees and the moon at 11. Isn't that interesting? 9/11. I just noticed that. Just a notice. I'm not inferring anything. It's just a notice. So apparently Kobe had a really interesting relationship with his parents. He kind of disowned them. Like there was a phase where they were very concerned about him. And I think they were concerned about his relationship or his marriage to Vanessa. And then he cut them off. Like, so I don't know if he ever resolved that with his parents. You didn't really hear much about Joe Bryant, his father. But to me, the Chiron moon conjunction does represent some kind of a wound in the family, and especially the family of origin. And what's also interesting here is that, you know, Kobe had to face rape charges. I mean, he had to face rape charges in Colorado. Maybe that's where he started to do his deals, possibly. But again, this is the feminine, right? And Chiron is the wounding of the feminine. And also, this is, you know, the Mars in conjunct to the moon, and the Mars in conjunct, and the Pluto in conjunct to the moon as well. That's a very heavy aspect. I think the event in Colorado was a game changer for him, and not in a great way. Like, I think he probably took on. Here's my hypothesis. I think that's when Kobe made a deal. I think he made a deal during that trial, and that whole process. That's my sense. And maybe we're seeing the deal that has to get paid off because he lost his daughter, right? The family lost a daughter. I'm just speculating here, but the in conjunct clearly is something kind of intense. Like, again, I mean, if you want to look at this idea that Kobe was a rapist, and we don't know what happened in that hotel room. We just don't know. We know that there was a woman that went there, and she was trying to, you know, she was a physical therapist. She went into his room, and then things happened, and they got out of control. We don't know what happened. But when I see this up at the top of the chart, and I see the in conjunct, I say what happened with her is probably, you know, what she said happened probably went down that way. And do I think that he was a serial rapist? I don't know, but I do think that this configuration definitely. I missed that. Could you say it again? Oh man, Siri's tuning in on me. That's weird. Hold on. Siri's a little spy, man. She's a little spy. I gotta turn her off. She's like Hal. Isn't Siri like Hal? Turn this off. I'm sorry, I missed that. You missed it because I didn't say a damn thing, Siri. You guys, has that ever happened to you guys? All of a sudden, Siri says, I'm sorry, I missed that. I don't even use Siri. Okay. But we don't know because Cope, I mean, I'm saying here that these are aspects that could be potentially violent, potentially sexually violent. I'm sorry, I'm just calling it the way I see it. But there's a part of Kobe that we don't know about. And do I think that, was he a serial? Was that like a one-off? Because he had to settle, right? He had to settle. Was it a one-off? I don't know. But he sure settled here with Vanessa. And he needed her, right? In a lot of ways, he needed her. And I think it's interesting that Kobe had all daughters too, that he surrounded himself with women biologically. Interesting stuff. And look, I'm not trying to speak ill of the dead. I'm just looking at his chart, and I'm trying to get a kind of a psychographic or, you know, topographical view of the man in a way that maybe we don't understand, or maybe we don't want to look at, because I definitely see that he had his talents, his hooks, in a very different kind of world. And when a death like this happens, it's not only tragic, but we begin to kind of make, at least I do, I make connections in my head. It's like, what's going on here? Was this like his time? Did he have to, you know, was this the time where he had to go meet his his so-called maker or teacher? Is that part of the deal? You know, we also have the Grammys tonight too, which I haven't really talked about. And the Grammys are happening at where? Staples Center, where Kobe played. And we know all the ritual shit that happens with the Grammys, like the death of Whitney Houston. I mean, come on now. Happened the night before the Grammys. And now we have Kobe dying before the Grammys and in the place that he played. I mean, I'm not watching the Grammys, but I'm sure that it's interesting on some level. So when we have this death, right, and we have it so close to the Grammys, we have it on a new moon, it feels very ritualistic, very ritualistic. People keep sending me stuff by Larry Johnson. And Larry Johnson now has a Twitter account, and Larry Johnson apparently is the Paul Revere of kind of the illuminated world and athletics and sports. You know, I have my thoughts on Larry Johnson, because what happens is we want people who have been behind the scenes. We love people who've been down in those trenches and have had experience. You know, that's why people like whistleblowers. You know, people like Julian Assange, because Julian Assange had this information. He was kind of in the bowels of the system in some ways. You know, that's why people like Kathy O'Brien or that gal from Australia who is blown. That's why people liked curly hair guy. They like him because oh, well, you're close to the flame, so you're legitimate. Isaac Cappy, you're legitimate. So Larry Johnson used to play for the Kansas City Chiefs, who were coming up in their Super Bowl, has been squawking a lot about Freemasonry and squawking a lot about the Illuminati and trying to connect all these various deities and rituals to athletes and entertainers. And he should know, he's been there. Larry Johnson got initiated by Jay-Z. If you go back and look at his time with Jay-Z, he and Jay were real close. You know what I'm saying? Very close. And once he took Jay-Z on, as representation. Like the Rockefeller agency represented him. They got into sports representation. And as soon as he did that, Larry Johnson's career went to hell. And, you know, I'm a football fan and I play fantasy football and all that shit. So I look at Larry Johnson, I'm like, dude, you used to be good. You had 2 great seasons. What the hell happened to you? And he just started to go off the rails. And he had an incident where I think he got violent with a woman. I mean, he was just hanging out with the wrong people. So maybe he's atoning for his time. And that would be actually a really good thing for him. But just if you're looking at Larry Johnson as an inside source, caveat emptor. Okay, the other thing that was happening here is that this Mars square that I was talking about, this is the progress chart. Let me go into a different chart. I have Kobe's relocated chart as well. Where is it? Oh, that's the last one I want to bring up. Okay, so this is the one I wanted to talk about. So remember, the natal chart is 1A, the relocated chart is 1B. So by moving to Los Angeles and being a part of the Lakers, Kobe Bryant enhanced his career and standing. His sun and Saturn moved out of the 8th house and he became more of a public figure in the 9th house. With his true node in Virgo, attention to detail, the meticulous nature of what Kobe Bryant did with his, and sometimes it's really hard to talk about people in a way where it's like, oh, he was this evil, satanic rapist. Like there are videos of Kobe being really like kind and sweet with his daughters. And it's really hard to reconcile some of the stuff sometimes. And I don't want to necessarily leave that out. And I'm not giving him a pass potentially for, you know, sort of the occulted pieces, nor am I really giving him a pass for what he did in Vail, Colorado. But then you see how he treated his kids, and it's like, wow, it's really, it's really kind of touching in a lot of ways. And so people are complex, and people have different sides at times to their nature. And again, I'm not giving them a pass, but when you watch some of those videos, you're like, it's like a father hanging out with his daughter. He had a basketball team with his daughter, started it up from nothing. That's where they were going. Clearly, he loved his kids. He loved his girls. And that's kind of the tragic part of this. And I've seen comments around Kobe and the helicopter crash. And it's like, you made your bed, now lie in it. Say hi to Satan for me. I mean, I've seen comments like that. So there are people that are hip to Kobe and this other side of him. You can't serve two gods, apparently. But the move to LA was good for Kobe. Calabasas, not far from Los Angeles. This is the chart, and this is where the planets were today when the copter went down. And here we have Mars in the first house, and Mars conjuncting his natal Neptune in the first house. And then we have, of course, Neptune down here. So we have the square. So you had a Neptune square going on in this chart, and you had a Mars conjunct Neptune and a Mars-Neptune square. And that is, that can be tricky. That can be real tricky. Now, Pluto is involved as well. Pluto is in opposition to his vertex right here. The vertex being the second ascendant. And if that's true, that means Pluto, it's not showing up here, but Pluto would be conjunct the anti-vertex in his chart, which is always in opposition to the vertex. And the vertex represents like the second ascendant. It's where things get interesting, right? It's where if you go deep enough through the vertex, you'll kind of open up into a different area of your life, of your consciousness, but you have to go deep into it. So in the vertex always happens, right? From the 9th house to the 5th house, which means the anti-vertex would be happening, but basically from the 10th house to the 11th house to the 4th house. So the anti-vertex is always going to be either opposite here in the 9th, in the 3rd, opposite here, in the 2nd, opposite here, in the 1st, opposite here, in the 6th, with the anti-vertex would be in the 11th or 12th rather, and then the anti-vertex could be here. So roughly from here to here, right? So that would mean Pluto would be on the anti-vertex. So the anti-vertex, if the vertex is the second ascendant and gives some insight and clues into where a person can develop with ease, it's almost like, it's kind of like a gift in some ways, if you can follow it. The anti-vertex represents challenges that are in opposition. So again, I think Kobe's a bit of a mama's boy with the sun, with the vertex at 22 Cancer, very close to Sirius conjunction. So there'd be issues with the father, even though the father gave him his genes, his gene pool, that Saturn Sun conjunction. Probably much closer in some ways to his father than his father might want to know. But this vertex piece, the anti-vertex, Pluto's right there. Pluto's right on his anti-vertex. And in Capricorn, you're dealing with things that are Capricornian in nature, where you're dealing with things like culture. And again, if you look at his series, the Kobe system, that's all very Capricornian. So to me, this feels like Kobe's time was up. Like his time was up. Even here with Neptune, beginning to oppose the midheaven. And this is his relocated chart. And this is when you're taken out of the world in a lot of ways. Like I went through this. I went through the Neptune opposition with my midheaven. It is hell. It is total hell. And I started to go through that right around 2015. And very difficult, very, very difficult. I'm really surprised in a lot of ways that I was able to keep this together in terms of, what I do for a living, because there were some times of this opposition I got to tell you, I wanted to give up. Like I was kind of done at times, and I continued to kind of plow through this thing. And I think it's because I have a Saturn Pluto trine in my chart. And that's very helpful. But I was going through a lot of doubt with what I was doing, how I was doing it. It was a very tricky time. And luckily, Neptune has moved away from my midheaven. Now I'm starting to have some different experiences. I'm really excited about what I'm doing again. It's amazing how astrology works like that. You know, I was really excited. Now I'm excited. For a while though, I was really having to kind of white knuckle this sometimes and plow through some stuff. So he had it here. So it kind of takes you out of the world, this Neptune opposition, right? But I think the big ticket item is here, right here. Also, the eternal flame is Vesta. So Mars, this is an interesting kind of transit because Mars is on his Vesta, the eternal flame. And in a lot of ways, Kobe will be remembered. Like there's going to be a lot. There's going to be a lot of Kobe tribute. Clearly, there'll be a statue outside of Staples for Kobe. That's going to happen. And Mars represents athletics and sports. So this, was his flame snuffed out, perhaps? Well, certainly it would burn bright. And I don't know, I've seen some footage of the airplane or the helicopter. Doesn't look like it went down in flames, but clearly there was a lot of smoke. And I thought about that moment. Because I think there were 9 people on board. I thought about that moment and I put myself into Kobe Bryant's shoes for a minute. And he's sitting there with his daughter. And they know that helicopter is going down. They know it's going down. And they don't know if they're going to live, but more than likely, they know that time's up. Like, what was the exchange like between the two of them? What was that exchange like? I could only, and again, for all of what I think he was engaged in as an 8th house person, he still has a daughter. And maybe this was what he had to deal with. I mean, maybe this was his reckoning in some ways. But still, I think about him being on that helicopter with that girl who was no more than 13 years old and having to look her in the eyes and thinking about maybe his life and what he had done and hadn't done, and how it all happened so quickly, and being there for that little girl who knows that she's probably going to die too. And, was that his hell? Was that his moment of hell? Did he have to look back and ask himself, did I cause this somehow? Did I perpetrate this? I mean, it's a heavy moment. It's a really heavy moment to think about, especially if you take in the occulted kind of connection. Now, what's also really interesting is LeBron James passed Kobe's scoring record the night before, right? He passed Kobe up. Now, LeBron is the king of LA, right? Theoretically, the torch has been passed to LeBron, theoretically. LA did not like LeBron. LA was always Kobe's town. Los Angeles loved Kobe. LeBron was a hired gun. And LeBron has been doing his best to kind of win the Lakers and their fans over, but not always doing a great job, by the way. I'd be very surprised if the Lakers didn't win the championship this year. Very, very surprised. Although he does have to go up against the Terminator and Kawhi Leonard, another interesting character. So I wanted to look at some of the Kobe LeBron stuff. This is really quite interesting. Let me find this thing here. Yeah, okay. Now, Larry Johnson seems to think that this is a war between secret societies. I don't know. I wouldn't poo-poo that idea, by the way. I wouldn't poo-poo it. LeBron has a big emblem from Boule on his chest, which means he's a Boule Freemason. Huge. I mean, he's got big Boule tattoo in his chest. So LeBron is in. We know LeBron is in. You know, he's cutting deals and doing the initiations, the rituals. Here we go. Here's his chart right here. So we got Kobe on the inside. There's his Saturn Sun conjunction, 8th house. LeBron's on the outside. What do we see right on Kobe's ascendant? LeBron's sun. How about that? Right? Kobe's ascendant leads right into LeBron's identity. So in some ways, we could see that the torch would be being passed to LeBron. The whole thing with LeBron and Kobe, though, is a little fishy. I mean, I know they're connected. They didn't really seem close, though. Cordial, but not close. But this is very interesting. LeBron is honed in on Kobe's identity. It's almost as if now there's some form of transference here to LeBron. No, LeBron's the king. He's the unquestioned king of LA. Unquestioned king. By the way, LeBron and Corona are the same number in simple gematria, and that number is 66. LeBron's got an interesting chart. He's got, I think of Mars and Pisces at times. I love Mars and Pisces. I think it's an interesting position for Mars, although Mars and the water signs can be difficult. Mars and Pisces can be very, very creative. And he's got it on his midheaven. But we see here that there's an opposition with LeBron's Mars and Kobe's Sun. Like LeBron's Mars is at what, like 2 Pisces, and Kobe's Sun is at 0 Virgo. LeBron's Mars is at 2 Pisces. Kobe's Saturn is at 3 Virgo. So there is conflict here. There is definitely conflict, because that's what the opposition represents, right? Conflict, and it's fixed. Even though both are mutable signs, I talked about how oppositions can be really fixed. You resolve the opposition by finding the midpoint. Maybe they did. But I think it's very interesting that LeBron has these aspects in his chart that in some ways kind of are in conflict with Kobe, but also feed off of Kobe as well. This is the conflict, and this is feeding off of Kobe right here. That's interesting. Very interesting. I'm not quite sure what to make of this, right? I mean, you know, did LeBron like catch some of Kobe's like spirit or essence as Kobe passed? Is that part of it? Right? Because you lead through the 12th house. LeBron's Neptune is in Kobe's 12th house. Or is this just kind of just a passing of the torch in some ways? But it's very interesting that his sun would be conjunct Kobe's ascendant. His sun is also in square with Kobe's Mars and Pluto and Venus. I don't think they got along. I mean, I think LeBron kind of looked up to Kobe a little bit, but I also think that once LeBron started to get handled, that relationship got changed, and that they were both dealing with groups behind the scenes that were, you know, that are guiding and directing and kind of moving their lives in hidden and occulted ways. I don't think they got along all the time. Although with the Virgo sun and the Capricorn sun, you know, there's some connection there. I think LeBron respected Kobe, sun trine to Saturn, sun trine. I think he respected him, but I don't think they always got along. I mean, look, even here, you know, LeBron's got that moon in Aries opposing Kobe's Pluto, opposing his Mars, opposing his Venus. So there's a lot of tension in this chart between the two. There's a lot of tension. I'm not sure they got along all the time. Again, level of respect, but I'm not sure they got along. And look at this, even with LeBron's Pluto, it's right on Kobe's midheaven. Isn't that interesting? And that he would actually, this is so fascinating. because he would wind up passing LeBron in scoring and become the Lakers' leading scorer. Like he has, even though he's never played for the Lakers, he's played for the Lakers all 1.5 seasons. He's now the highest scoring player in Laker history. And Pluto sort of, again, eclipsing, or not eclipsing, conjuncting Kobe's midheaven. In some ways, like the death of Kobe, right? And I'm not saying LeBron James killed Kobe, but clearly when he surpassed him, he did. LeBron James became the king right here when he passed him on the scoring title. Interesting stuff. Mars opposition to Sun Saturn, Moon opposition to Pluto Mars, Sun square Pluto Mars Venus. Difficult relationship. Not always in step. You know, there was a war going on last year with the Lakers organization, which might give us some like inside baseball in some ways. So last year, the Lakers were in turmoil, real turmoil. They had Magic Johnson and this guy, Rob Pelinka, who looks like Rob Lowe. It's weird. They're both Rob and they both look like each other. Well, I think Rob Lowe has a bit more hair. Pelinka used to play at Michigan. He was a player at Michigan. Played on the Fab Five teams with Jalen Rose and all those guys. Anyway, Rob Pelinka is Kobe's agent. And Rob Pelinka became the general manager of the Los Angeles Lakers. He was co-general manager last year with Magic Johnson. And LeBron is represented by Clutch Sports. And Rich Paul is LeBron's buddy, runs Clutch Sports, has a lot of other basketball players as clients. So what Clutch Sports does and what Rich Paul does and what LeBron does, they go into these organizations and they begin to ask for certain things. They ask for certain players. They ask for certain things for LeBron. They don't want certain players. And LeBron essentially got run out of Miami because Pat Robertson didn't want any of that shit. Pat Riley, rather. Pat Robertson. Can you imagine Pat Robertson as an NBA coach? Pat Riley didn't want any of that shit. He told LeBron to take a hike. They didn't want him back because they were too intrusive. So they go back to Cleveland and have that little makeup story, the makeup tale, and they get their fake little championship when they beat the Golden State Warriors because Draymond Green was suspended and Andrew Bogut was hurt and Steph Curry was hurt. So they got their little championship. And then LeBron started to say, okay, I'm done. But he was moving people around. They got to LA. They were starting to do the same thing. Well, we don't want this person. We want this person. We want Anthony Davis. We don't want this person on the team. We don't want this coach. We don't want Luke Walton as a coach. We want a different coach. Now, Kobe, remember now, Kobe's got his guy inside of the Lakers front office. He's got Rob Pelinka. Rob is one of Kobe's best friends. Rob is his agent. Rob is one of the general managers. So we have a conflict inside of the Lakers front office. And you have Magic Johnson, who's worthless, absolutely worthless, not doing anything. So it becomes this turf war in a lot of ways between LeBron and Pelinka, LeBron and Rich Paul, and Pelinka and Kobe. And guess what? Kobe and Pelinka won. They won the turf war. They got what they wanted. Rob Pelinka got sold general manager position inside the organization, and then Magic was gone. And a lot of people think that Kobe was running everything behind the scenes. There's his eighth house. You know, Kobe was the mastermind behind a lot of this stuff. So I don't think LeBron and LeBron's people appreciated how Kobe was giving them the runaround with the Lakers, because their experience with the teams or the teams they've been with is that they go in and they start calling the shots. And they weren't calling the shots with the Lakers. It was Kobe and Rob Pelinka. Now Kobe's gone. And now it's the LeBron show. Now it's the Rich Paul show. And now Rob Pelinka's on an island. And that's going to be a very interesting relationship to watch. Oh, here's my puma. Here's my big cat. Say hi, everybody, Jasper. The Lakers, man. I was going to talk about the Lakers a little bit. That is one weird team. One weird team. Very strange. Jenny Buss, who is the owner of the Lakers. First of all, Jerry Buss. Very kinky guy. He was a very kinky Dr. Jerry Buss. Everybody loves Dr. Jerry Buss. Jerry has some very unusual relationships. And some of them with some of his players. And some of them with players that are very well known. Very well known. In fact, I just mentioned one of them. No, I'm not talking about Kobe. So Jerry had some very unusual relationships. Now, his daughter, Jeannie Buss, if I'm not mistaken, was either in Penthouse or Hustler or Playboy. And she was naked and she had some basketballs over her boobies. So there's this idea that Jeannie Buss is, kind of an MK Ultra daughter. That she's the owner, but she's an MK Ultra daughter because that's kind of the gate she swung through. And she got into a major feud with her brothers, Jim Buss, and kicked them out. Major family feud. They've had a lot of turmoil and a lot of really kind of high strange with the Lakers. And you had the whole thing with Magic and the HIV. I mean, what other team goes through this shit? Just very odd stuff. And of course, Hollywood with Jack Nicholson and Diane Cannon. It's a very unusual organization. It's a family-run organization, obviously, because the Busses, own the team, and still to this day. But very, very different. They've always had that Showtime vibe, right? And Showtime is Los Angeles, and Los Angeles is a very dark place, very, very dark place. And I think the Lakers are kind of an extension of that darkness. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens now with Rob Pelinka and being Kobe's best friend, being out on an island. He doesn't have Kobe behind the scenes anymore to help him out and to kind of be the mastermind. Now it's Rob Pelinka against Rich Paul and Magic and his crew. It's going to be very interesting to watch. Very, very interesting. One of the things that grabbed my attention as well, and this is just one of those weird syncs. If I can find this thing right here. Very odd sync. You can see Kobe's tattoo there. It's the crown with the butterfly, the monarch coming out of it, right? Very interesting symbolism. Anyway, this is Kobe, and here we have David Stern. And David Stern was one of the most successful and in many ways controversial commissioners in the NBA. When he took over, the NBA was really struggling. Like, you couldn't even watch the NBA playoff games on primetime. They were shown later that night. I mean, it's that bad. Nobody cared. And David Stern took the NBA and brought it to the world. He had Magic, he had Larry Bird, and he eventually had Michael. And there's a lot of issues with David Stern, which I don't really want to get into right now. That said, astrologically, here's the astrological connection. Kobe was born on the 23rd of August, which makes his sun 0 degrees Virgo. David Stern was born on the 22nd of September, which makes his sun 29 degrees Virgo. So in one sign, we have the Alpha and we have the Omega. And David Stern died on the 1st of January this year. And then Kobe dies, 26 days later if you count the 1st, 25 if you don't count the 1st. And I thought that this was kind of interesting and telling in a lot of ways, because Virgo represents health. It's a health sign. And we're dealing again with this backdrop of the coronavirus and this weird connection with the king and the crown and the corona, and how LeBron has this very intimate relationship with China, makes over $30 million a year alone from China. Think about that. Think about that. $30 million a year. And that's probably conservative. So I thought this was a very interesting sync between these two. And they're both gone. The Alpha and the Omega Virgo. Okay. I wanted to look at Michael. Michael sent me some tweets tonight. Or some texts. Let's see. There's a lot of 13 and 33 symbolism here. Speed up to 313. There was a 13.3. Daughter was 13. 33 in there. Helicopter took off at 9:06 and crashed at 9:47. 41 minutes later, he died at 41. Oh, that's interesting. That's really interesting. Thank you, Michael, for that. That's some interesting sync script. Wow, fascinating stuff. All right, let me check with you guys. Let's see where you are with all of this. It's a kind of a heavy energy in a lot of ways, but got to get through it. LeBron, you mean say Kobe? Kobe, yes. Sorry, Kobe, yes. I meant to say Kobe. Let's see. Jersey number equals a 6. Remember when Kobe was a third smaller in girth? That was many years ago. I wonder how long he had the crown butterfly. He had that for a long time, Heather. Long time. From the mind of Kobe Bryant comes this radically original portrait of 5 young basketball players, one enlightening coach, and the awesome transformative power of the game. There is a cannibal restaurant, and we were talking about this. It's funny. We were talking about this on Facebook yesterday. Let's see. It's LA No Bueno. Ask Emily Moyer. The theater is dark. The only illuminated part is the stage. What else do we have here? Your AID astrology read, Tracy Twyman's. Whoa, The Secret of Minnie Mouse. Not a lot of astrologers getting into that kind of stuff. It's true. It's true. I found one of threes. Okay, here we go. What else we have? I call my cat Puma. Okay, how does one sabotage a helicopter? Well, there's a lot of different ways one could sabotage a helicopter. You could use a particle beam weapon if you wanted to. That wouldn't be so hard. You could do something with the fuel system. You could have a timer on the fuel system. You know, that the fuel would cut off, or there could be a small explosion. There'd be time to go off in one of the engines. I mean, sabotaging a helicopter wouldn't be that hard, if indeed that happened. All right, let me get into the China thing. The China crisis. Remember that band, China Crisis? We're coming up on 2 hours now. Puma boy. You're my Puma. Yes, you are. So I brought up China's chart. I wanted to look at some transits here with China. And the thing that really got me was Pluto, the Pluto transit of the 12th. And remember, the 12th represents shit like biolabs, right? What goes on behind the scenes? We got Pluto there hanging out. And Saturn as well. The Saturn's going to conjunct China's ascendant in June. Maybe they're going to ask for help from the rest of the world. I don't know. But also, we got the Pluto-Jupiter conjunction, which is interesting because if indeed the 12th house does represent a biolab experience, Jupiter is all about what? Blowing it up, expanding. So could we have Pluto here as a harbinger and expansion of what they've been playing around with, or what the theoretical, because this all isn't really cut and dry. We're kind of, kludging this together, piecing this together, because there's some thought here that the Chinese might have been set up, right? That whoever helped them bring the virus in there did something to maybe set it loose in some ways, right? So, was this an outside operation? Because we've been seeing outside operations, covert operations in Hong Kong. Is this a covert operation that's happening with China? Question mark. Because I don't think the Chinese would sacrifice their own. I don't think they'd sacrifice some of their best and brightest, although maybe they're inoculated. Because they've got big plans. They got one belt, one road. But maybe this is going to slow one belt, one road down. We've got the Jupiter square here with Neptune, 8 degrees. So that means that Pluto conjuncting Jupiter is definitely squaring Neptune. And then the 8th house, what are we talking about? The 8th house, death, mortality, also behind the scenes. Like if I were to look at something in the China chart that says that there is a there, it's right there, right? It's Pluto in the 12th house. And the 12th house represents things we don't see. And here, oh man, this is not great, right? Because the South Node is escaping the 12th house. Oh yeah, it's escaping the 12th house. And it's headed towards Sagittarius and the rest of the world. I'm doing a little bit of dark speculation here. But again, if I'm looking at what's going on, it's right there. Saturn-Pluto conjunction, conjunct Jupiter, square Neptune, 8th house, all this occulted and hidden material in the 8th house. Very interesting. There was another thing that I saw. What was it? What was it? Transit-wise. I think that was the big transit. There's Chiron as well. And Chiron coming in and opposing the Chinese sun at 7 Libra. And to me, that would be a kind of intervention from the outside, you know, intervention from the outside. And Aries tends to connect with the military and blood, opposing the Chinese sun. So one could make a case that as Chiron begins to go deeper into this opposition, that China would be weakened. And if you look at what's really interesting too, if you look at like the last transit of Chiron, that's when China wakes up. When Chiron is in Aries, that's when Nixon goes to China. And that's a huge moment in American and global history, because no other president had gone to China. That Chiron cycle starts, so what are we talking, like 1970, 71, right around there. So this is the end. Well, so this was 50 years ago. This was 50 years ago. So 50 years ago, it was the opening, right? It was the key that was unlocking China, right here. Chiron was the key that unlocked China. It was Nixon coming from the West. And what's interesting about Nixon is that he's a Capricorn, which means that he would be here inside of China's chart, right behind the scenes. Very interesting. So from that 50-year cycle, from 1970, roughly 71 to 2020, 2021, China got really strong. And potentially now it could get very weak. Potentially. We're going to have to see how this thing plays out. But it's interesting. Like they rode the cycle, right? They rode this cycle. Once Nixon got there, Nixon did some shit, man. Like he was the guy that flipped the currency and got us on the petrodollar. He basically said, I'm going to ensure that there's going to be Western dominance for as many years to come. So he made the dollar the de facto currency for doing any kind of oil transactions. He also opened up China. And does mean, is that China going to close now? Right there, Chiron opposition to the sun. Interesting. Very interesting. South Node in Libra. What do we have to look forward to with that? China's going to be dealing with a lot of Mars this year. When Mars is in Aries, posing a lot of these Libra planets. It's going to be a heavy year for China. It's going to be a heavy year. They may feel threatened. I wouldn't doubt it. They may feel threatened now, unless of course they're totally in on everything, in which case it's like, we'll see. We'll see. But this is martial action right here with these oppositions. I mean, to me, this feels a little bit like war. Definitely conflict. Definitely conflict. That's June, July. But the cycle, which started 50 years ago, is over, right? And China got really, really strong during that 50-year cycle. Went through every single part of the Chinese chart, right? Open, 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 open. And then here now, moving into opposition. Interesting times, astrological for China. So we got the Pluto conjunction in the biolab of the 12th house, conjuncting Jupiter, squaring Neptune. And I think the key right there, that's the key. That is the key. The Chiron opposition to the sun. Okay, let me get out of here. I'm not sure what more I want to share around this, except that the Pluto transit of the 12th house is a heavy one. You know, not everybody goes through it in their lifetime. Not every country goes through it. And there is a death. I mean, big death that takes place with Pluto in the 12th. I mean, I basically took the 90s off when Pluto was in my, I swear to God, I literally took the 90s. I didn't take it off, but it was like most people when they're in I was in my 30s and during the 90s. It's like, you know, you're making families and you're building your career. Man, I had a very different path. I didn't check out, but I had a very different reality during the 90s. I was doing very different things. And looking back on it, it was kind of perfect in some ways for Pluto going through my 12th. I went through a lot of intensity in Scorpio. Sometimes it was really good intensity, I have to say. And other times it was not so good. But they're going through it now. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens with this country, right? Because this is not business as usual here at all. At all. Okay. Let me come back to you guys, see where you're at, and get ready to shut it down tonight. I have natal Pluto and Uranus in the 12th. What do we have here? 14-day incubation, much bigger window than SARS. Imagine China and Iran revolting. I feel the people see they have nothing to lose in China. Chinese psyche is, in Hong Kong, they're building on burnings in Hong Kong. That's a whole different reality. You know, that eclipse cycle, that major solar eclipse, like, let me see if I get a map of China real quick here. Because we can track the eclipse chart. So find a good one. Looks like it's pretty good. So I can bring it up here. Yeah, it's pretty good. All right, so okay, this is where the eclipse path was. Right here. Right through here. This is the eclipse path. Right through here. South China Sea, right there. So we saw the tsunami and the volcano in the Philippines. So China, South China, is not very far from the eclipse path. There is Wuhan, right there. Right there. There's Wuhan. So very close to the eclipse path. And we focused on Hong Kong during the eclipse path. Right here, right? It was right over Hong Kong's sun. Wuhan's not that far away. So we're seeing, again, in the eclipse portal, and for me, the eclipse portal for the solar eclipse that we had in December on the 26th, that extends all the way out to the 5th of July. because to me, that's the companion eclipse. 6 eclipses this year, hell of a lot of eclipses. But clearly that eclipse went just over the southern part of China, right? So again, where was that going to take place? China's 12th house. It wasn't that long ago. It was 20, and even the lunar eclipse, but that lunar eclipse was, let's see, that was in Cancer, but it was still affecting the sun, right? No, it was hold on. No, it was, yeah, it was affecting, it was a lunar eclipse in Cancer. My bad. Anyway, China was in the path of the eclipse. Go figure. Makes sense. All right. Where are we? Let me check out. We check in with you guys. See what's happening. Well, it was interesting. Yeah, absolutely. Simon or Corona is suspect. Yeah, I think stock is down with Corona. Yeah, it was right there in the eclipse. A 14-day incubation period sounds like a psyop. Increases vectors to astronaut. I've heard it was 11. I've heard it was 11. So we'll look. We're gonna play center field with this stuff. But the thing you don't want to do is you got to be really critical or careful around the talk of vaccines, and you've got to be really critical and careful around this idea of putting people in quarantined areas. Okay, and this is really important. So keep your immunity up. Don't just stay healthy. Stay in your body. Stay centered. Do your best to stay aligned with the logos within you, and after that, the chips fall where they may. Then we might be dealing with nothing. Could be just another, fear trip. It's already a fear trip, but it could be one that just plays itself out and fizzles out, or it could be something quite different. And if it's quite different, then we're all here, and we're all going to deal with it, and we're all going to stare it down, and it is what it is. Just stay healthy and try not to freak out. Don't feed the beast. All right. You can find me at robertphoenix.com if you want. I am doing readings. It's still a great time to get readings, right? Because astrology doesn't always have to do with, what kind of job you're going to get or where your relationship is. Astrology also speaks to the soul, speaks to kind of where you are and, why you came here and what you're here to do, what you're here to progress through and finish. And there's a lot you can get out of astrology that can help you real time with not just the mundane affairs of your world, which often aren't mundane because they're your affairs, but also the spiritual side of astrology as well. So if you want a reading, come over to robertphoenix.com. I got a newsletter I'm working on. I'll be sending that out. I know a lot of you have signed up for it. If not, come over to my website. I've got a little sign up window there. And thank you everybody for being a part of tonight's experience and hanging out with me. And and again, I'm just going to be straight up, I'll bet you, and I was talking earlier tonight, the Vanessa Bryant is filthy rich, like so much money. And I'll bet you she'd trade it all in right now if she could have Kobe and her daughter back. Think about that for a moment. Just think about what you have and who you have in your life. And you may not be stupid rich. If you are, you're probably not watching the show. But you may be stupid rich. You may not have the people around you that are important and close. And I guarantee you, she'd trade it all in right now to have those two back. Remember that as you go to sleep tonight. Think about all the good people and all the good things that you have in your life and what you have versus what you don't have. I'm Robert Phoenix. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to step what's possible. I'll be back on Tuesday with 15 Minutes of Flame. Night.